Broadcasting live from the Bonders Enclave on the plain of Ikoria, this is Tap Tap Concede. Welcome, everybody, to Tap Tap Concede. I'm Graham, and joining me this week we have Cameron.
Hello.
Ben Ulmer.
Yo!
And Ben Wheeler.
Ahoy.
Who is here to talk to us about a homebrew format for Arena called Gladiator. And what is that? Well, we'll get to it. But before that, a reminder that this show is brought to you by Card Kingdom. Do check out cardkingdom.com/LRR. We recommend Card Kingdom because we think they're great and they do really fast shipping and excellent customer service, and they're all around nice folks. And if you tell them loading ready run sent me button, please, they'll give you a little 1-inch button. And I don't know what it says right now because I don't know what the state of their stock is like. But it'll be a fun surprise for all of us. Also, this show is brought to you by you and your kind support of our Patreon at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. And we thank you so much for it. So, at time of recording, the previous Friday night paper fight, or in this case, the Friday night not paper fight, was the four of us playing Gladiator. Now, what in the heck is Gladiator? Wheeler, we're gonna chuck this one over to you. What is Gladiator? How did it happen? Why? How did we get here? What's going on?
Great. Thank you for asking. So Gladiator, put quite simply, is Arena Singleton. So it's a 100 card Singleton format, meaning that your deck has to have a minimum of 100 cards, and you're only allowed a maximum of one of each individual card in your deck, aside from, say, basic lands or cards like Rat Colony. And it draws from the card pool of anything you can collect on Arena. So that includes basically all the sets that are available. Currently, that's Ixalan up to Ikoria. Any of the historic anthology sets, which we have 2 of them, a third one coming out very soon. And the new Arena player experience set that some people might be familiar with from the tutorials, which they give you a couple of cards here and there. Nothing too big, but you can use them. We have a banned list. The banned list is only Oko, the small Oko, to clarify, Thief of Crowns. No sideboard, no commander, no companion, no color identity, no outside the game, nothing like that. Where you play it like tournament Magic, except there's no sideboard, 100 cards, and then you just go nuts 1v1. It's Arena Singleton. It's great.
Sweet. So it's definitely most closely similar to Canadian Highlander.
Yeah, it has its kind of roots among Canadian Highlander, because I mean I got my gross hands in it, as well as early on into getting the format off its feet, giving it a name, kind of hammering down the rules. A lot of the people that were jamming it were Canadian Highlander community members, mostly from like the online communities. And but it shares other kind of qualities with like the other Singleton variants over the years. The German Highlander format, the actual formerly known as Singleton format from Wizards. But yeah, it's very much similar in the sense of you kind of just pick what you want to do and you get to do it.
So actually that's a good point, because there have been other attempts at, just in terms of similarities to other formats.
Right.
There have been other attempts at sort of like, okay, what can we do that is kind of like a Highlander analog on Arena? What's a Singleton, like what if we did 100 card Singleton sort of thing? Mm-hmm. So what differentiates Gladiator, sweet name, by the way, what differentiates Gladiator from sort of other variations on this theme?
I can't take all the credit for the name, and for, I guess, formalizing part of the rules too. It started off there was a smaller kind of community of players playing a historic kind of Highlander, which had the same kind of arena singleton vibe, because admittedly it's not, not the most novel idea to say like, hey, I want to play like this format but on this platform. And in fact, one of my good friends and a Victoria local was very heavily involved in this community, and had been for over a year by now, and had introduced me to that format, again over a year by now. And I kind of on and off, you know, paid attention to it and whatnot. And then whenever a set releases on Magic Online, there's often issues. Let's put it that way. And so one day I was looking for something to stream, couldn't play Magic Online. I was like, I guess I'll just jam this, let's play Arena Singleton, no rules, do what you want, sort of thing. And then slowly we kind of evolved, once you get more eyes on a format, once you get more people, brewing and whatnot, like we ended up going from not a lot of people to overnight you have like 500 new players that all have, some amount of singleton experience in other formats. And we kind of realized like, well, we don't want to like usurp anything, we don't want to eclipse anything. And we there were differing values, of course, because you have people coming from different walks of singleton life. um and so through a community effort, talking with people, figuring out what felt the smoothest to them, what they felt the smoothest was, like the smoothest rule set to getting other people into the format as well. And then we ended up coming up with a format that we were going to call Centurion until we were like, Gladiator just sounds more like recognizable. Because accessibility is a huge part of the format. Like, I cannot stress it enough. The fact that we've had prominent community members, put it to the test and be like, here are all the decks you can make with just a brand new Arena account.
Wow.
It's accessibility is pretty huge. We wanted people to, because the other singleton formats, you're kind of restricted to, say, webcam Magic or Canadian, or sorry, on Magic Online, given social distancing. And so Arena being more widespread, easier to get stuff, cards, and easier to get other people into using it, just seemed like a good home for something like this. And then, I mean, we also lucked out that the format is fantastic. It's fun. It's so much fun.
I mean, Arena's been getting like better and better, I think, too, with like the new player experience. Like, I think like between like the tutorials, and there's like the color challenges or whatever, where you can kind of like pick a color and start like playing games with it and slowly unfolding, like getting more and more cards through that, has been super, super helpful. I think like I'd be interested to see like the playability, because I mean, like I as I'm sure you're about to get to, like one of the things that seems really, really interesting about the card pool and stuff of Gladiator is that on top of all the new sets that get released on Arena, every once in a while we get these historic dumps that have some really interesting cards, but those are typically ones that you have to buy or craft. Like you can't, there's no like new player experience to pick up historic things.
Technically, no. Somebody crunched the numbers on the Discord, because the announcement gives you, there's 2 weeks until the cards go live. And if you high roll a couple of 750 quests, play your dailies and get those quests and everything, like once a day, every day sort of thing, which people have been doing with Gladiator because it's super easy to just bang those out of the park with a couple of games or a couple of matches. It takes like a week after launch, you would have the necessary gold alone to pick it up. But yeah, it's stuff like that is more of a, you have to make an effort to, say like, I'm going to pick up this, or I'm going to pick up part of that. But also, like, you don't have to necessarily.
Like that's the interesting thing, right? Is like you can still do free to play Arena always, right? Like you can get all these wild cards and all that kind of jazz just through playing. And like I think over the past couple of years as well, just like the rewards and stuff. Like I remember you'd get like a quest and it was like, all right, this is like 100 gold or whatever, and you're like, okay. And now like it's very rare I don't get one that's like 750, and I half the time even just like forget about it. I'm like, oh, all right, I just earned like 3,000 gold just from playing some ladder today or something. So that's kind of interesting.
And in the case of the historic cards, you can use wild cards to pick them
Yeah.
up. And if you're only getting them for Gladiator, you only need one. You don't even need a playset.
Yeah.
Yeah, I for whatever reason took it upon myself to own literally one copy of every card on Arena, which I have, for lack of better terms, thrown away so many wild cards just on like just absolute garbage, like M19 and like Ixalan, Rivals of Ixalan kind of rares for the sake of completionism, but you don't need those at all. And it's there are so many other things, like even just perfectly fine cards, that if that isn't your cup of tea, then you never have to interact with it if you don't want to.
So like with that, like with the card pool being what it is, and then like, from like, let's say somebody is listening to this podcast for the first time. First off, hi. And second,
Hi, welcome.
Welcome to Magic.
Happy to have you.
But like, if they boot up Arena, they're going through this new player experience. There's got to be like a card pool. Like, are there like is there like a good staples list of like cards, or like what would you recommend to like the new player wanting to come into this format?
I kind of wish I had the exact specifics of what is given to you. There have been like articles written by Gladiator community members going infinitely more in depth than I could right now. But I believe you get at least one of every shock land for starters.
Well, really?
Oh, wow, really? Huh.
I didn't know that.
I believe so. I think you might have to put in a publicly available code that has yet to expire, but that was a big selling point. There was something about the Czech lands from Dominaria being available in some way, shape, or form. But even outside of that, there are a couple of like cross archetype staples that you could pick up. But in general, I mean, there's staples stuff like Fabled Passage. Picking up lands is always a good thing to do. Picking up very powerful cards from the past year is also a pretty good way to look at it. Like planeswalkers, creatures. It's the format itself is still developing. And so what kind of, say, removal or answers that you have is where people are still figuring out what the most ideal kind of configuration is. Like even myself, I'm putting Disfigure into way too many decks because
Right.
it's so difficult to to shake off this mindset of like Canadian Highlander, like everything's cheap and efficient. And it's like, nah, Ben, you should just play Terror. I mean, not actually Terror, but you should just play like something with a little more oomph instead of this card, because, what people are bringing to the table, at least right now, isn't as directly affected by a card like Disfigure. That could change too with the new sets. We have, as you said, the historic anthology that's on the horizon. It's like 21st of May, I think, somewhere around then. We have the new Teferi, like the core set that's coming out. Jumpstart, all the cards from Jumpstart are going to Arena.
Oh,
from
really?
what they said.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Amonkhet's getting added late summer, I think.
Oh, they're bringing it back.
Yeah, it's like
my girl, my beautiful Hazaret.
Yep, she's sure coming back.
My girl.
And she's bringing no, not Karizev yet. Earthshaker Kenra, Soulscar Mage, On-Crop Crasher, like
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah. Ramanap Ruins.
will there possibly be then a cycling deck in Gladiator?
I believe, well, like dedicated cycling might be a bit hard. Like I'm sure there will be. Like every time I've said like this can't be a deck, I just end up losing to it. So
This is really interesting because like I'm actually building a cycling commander for a game that I'm playing in tomorrow. And the pool is really it's really deep. And an overwhelming amount of the cards are like in Amonkhet, as well as like the current set. That being said, like so many of like the super powerful payoffs are not really in those. And like when
Right.
you're looking for the cycling cards, you also kind of want to delve into the cards that are like when you discard a card or when you draw a card. So like you might be able to fill it out a little bit of that, but like there's certainly more than enough. And I mean, especially too like this is a different scenario too because there's like that commander cycling precon that came out. But like I would say a good portion of like the really good payoffs and stuff are not necessarily in these sets, and if they are in the sets, like you need multiples of them, I guess. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm way off base.
no, I definitely think you're on to something. It's really hard for me to like dial in on something like that as well because like while something like cycling, I mean, honestly, if you asked me yes or no, yeah, there's going to be a deck that'll have cycling payoffs and play cycling cards, and you will die to Drakehaven or like giant
Mm-hmm.
shark typhoons or whatever it may be. Um, because decks like that, you know, the quality of the cards with cycling have gone up, but we don't have Astral Slide proper or Astral Drift.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like that's the only place where the hesitation comes from, and that other decks are also getting juiced up. Like Aggro's getting a huge boon from Amonkhet. And we like recently I ran into an Enchantress deck and I was kind of like, oh well, this is cute, cool. Like I'm glad, like awesome, somebody built this. I had looked at it and thought like, there's just not enough. But there's like 3 or 4 enchantresses right now, if you count Whirlwind of Thought, which we do.
Mm-hmm.
And like they're not the most spectacular variants of this effect, but they're good enough that when you have payoffs like Kiora Best the Sea God, Sigil of the Empty Throne, Mirror Maid your Sigil of the Empty Throne, you know, all these kind of cards, like I lost in spectacular fashion, not even close. Um, and it's like, oh, okay, so a deck like this can function great. And it's also just getting Enchantress's presence and the 5 Hondens, the shrines from Kamigawa in the
Mm-hmm.
new anthology.
Oh, the
So,
Hondens are coming. I didn't know that.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Mirari's Wake. So like that deck, like if a deck can win 1 match, it can probably win 2.
I don't want to cycle back too much. I just want to make the point to correct myself on this. Just because I'm literally looking at cycling cards that are coming on in now. If it happens, my guess is it's going to be some sort of new perspectives combo with like either just put a bajillion cycling cards in your bin and hit somebody with Zenith Flare, or maybe doing like a mill thing with Psychic Corruption. That's Ben's guess. That's Ben Ulmer's guess is new perspective cycling combo in Gladiator. Maybe that's where it comes from. Because new perspectives makes the cycling cost 0 on cards. So if you can just like slam through your entire deck and then just hit somebody with a big Zenith Flare, or have a Psychic Corruption and go through your entire deck and make them mill out, then maybe that's the way to go.
Wow.
Or
Yeah. I mean,
Psychic Corrosion.
Psychic Corrosion. Sorry, I said corruption. You're right. Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of interesting ones. I mean, or maybe it's just like this little dummy, the cunning. What is it? Cunning Survivor. The guy that's like a 1/3 for 1 in a blue, and whenever you cycle or discard a card, it gets +1/+1 and unblockable.
Oh yeah. Okay, I'm familiar. I was thinking the there's a Vile Manifestation. It's like a 2-mana 1/4
Right.
or 0/4 that gets +1/+0 for each cycling card
Yeah.
in your graveyard. I also just realized Eerie Ultimatum, the
Yeah.
return any number of permanents back from your graveyard. So you just cycle a bunch of anything and then just bring it all back.
There was an instant from Amonkhet that did that too. It was like Shadow
of the Grave. Yeah, bring it all back to the hand. Whew.
Yeah, so maybe combo. Who knows? Anyways, I didn't want to turn this into the cycling podcast, but I'm just like looking at him like, oh wait, maybe Ben's completely wrong. Maybe I'm completely wrong, and there might be a thing here. I'm liking it.
This is quite literally outside. I mean, I know I'm biased because I'm literally here talking about why people should play this format, but like it's been like rediscovering Magic all over again, and that may sound like it's like I'm just shout like repping hyperbole here for it, but genuinely like going through the preview season or the preview day of the historic anthology felt like Christmas. It was just like I was looking at cards that I have known about and have owned for the past 20 years, and I'm like getting giddy about Crowsand Tusker. So like it's like a non-commander don't let your memes be dreams format.
It reminds me of playing a Pauper Cube for the first time, where it's like okay, a bunch of commons, I'm sure it'll be fun, but it can't be that spicy. And then you start drafting and you're like, whoa, this is awesome. And it's like, okay, sure, 100 card singleton, but you're limited to what's on Arena. That's not that many cards, really. Oh, it's a surprising number of cards.
Yeah. And so far, every expectation that I've had as like that I've tried to think about like, okay, well, what is something that could go not necessarily wrong, but like what's a quality that could be brought up that might feel a little like draining, or something that a player might see and go like, do I really want to have to deal with this card again? Like I thought I was done after it rotated. But I mean, everything from like Field of the Dead to Nexus of Fate, it just to like the idea that something like Bant Control or Bant Ramp or like a 5-color like Fires of Invention deck like being top dog, it's all just proven to be not true, which is great. Like having all your expectations, at least your negative expectations, like, okay, well, these could all be problems, and then none of them are problems. It's very relieving.
So what sort of stuff as exciting as it is to talk about how things could change when Historic Anthology 3 or Amonkhet come in, you mentioned what sort of things could someone make with just, without knowing the literal card pool, what kind of things have you seen from the cards you get for signing up for a free Arena account?
You have kind of like, I guess, what people would expect as well. Like if you're talking about, building through certain limitations, monocolor decks kind of come to mind. Mono red and mono white, mono black, mono green.
I think any like scenario where you don't have to use your rare cards on lands probably helps you out significantly in these sort of steps.
Yeah, especially because the mana base is the biggest weakness in the sense of like how powerful your mana base is comparatively to how good the cards you are casting are, to the point where you have like if I'm playing a 2-color deck, I'm going to play any triome that fits into those 2 colors, just because it's a dual land in those. It's like a dual land in those colors that if I have like a check land, it'll come into play untapped.
And later in the game, you can cycle it away.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, kind of an eyebrow raiser, but you have to work with the tools that you have at hand. So then sticking to either 1 color, like maybe the occasional 2-color deck that isn't 2-color intensive is going to be something that people could explore. But other than that, like I've seen people go as deep as like the three, which seems weird now that I'm saying it, but going as deep as like 3-color control style decks, where if you play like a temple into a guild gate into I don't know, evolving wilds, great, fine. Like that's okay. You're going to blow up the board anyways, so why not? But yeah, other than that, like very specific decks, Green X is usually pretty good. Like there are a lot of very powerful green cards. I'm sure anybody that has looked at Magic in the past 2 years is familiar with this. And being able to use them, like your mana, you don't have to invest as much into the other, like the mana base for that. Just because again, like you're already getting the shock lands, and I believe, again, I have to double check on the check lands, but you're already getting enough resources to at least spend your, if you have any gold or packs or whatever or wild cards, to use it on kind of your top end curve. And you don't have to worry about your mana base as much. I have the article in front of me that is called Building Your Gladiator Deck Without Ever Spending a Wild Card. And I mean, I guess my expectations are even blown aside, because we have there's a Rug mid-range deck, so Temur mid-range, a Bant life gain deck, Mardu Sacrifice, Esper Control, Jund mid-range. So these are all shards or wedges. But I think even myself, like the amount of single rares or mythics that Arena gives you just for booting it up and playing certain games, or using, again, these free to get public access kind of codes, you only get one of the cards, like one rare, like one Aurelia, or like one Ravager Worm, or whatever it may be, but that's fine. That's all you ever need.
Well, I mean, that's the big point, right? It's like just like Highlander, nothing rotates, right? Like it's an eternal format now at this point, right? So it's like any wild card that you spend is gonna be worth it. Like you're gonna have that card now, right, in your collection. So that's an interesting upside.
Just for anyone who is new to Arena or thinking of getting on board, I was trying to find out what cards come with a new Arena account, and I can't exactly find that out, but you do get some number of starter decks, and also there are the set release codes that give you 3 packs of the set, and they're all still functional. So, you know, this might even be useful for people who are playing Arena for some time now. If you have not used, this is all one word with intercaps, play Ravnica, play Allegiance, play War Spark, play M20, that's M20, play Eldraine, and play Theros. You can get 3 packs of each of those things.
So all these deck lists that I had named don't actually involve using any codes. All these deck lists are made purely by the cards that you get from the tutorial, and then the series of color challenges that they have, where when you have a new account, you do 1 challenge a day, and then this says after 11 days, you get access to all of these. So that's not, again, as you said, 3 boosters per code. So yeah, in addition to building all these deck lists, you end up getting what is that, like 18 packs?
Yep.
That's pretty good.
Seems good.
So I wanted to talk a bit about the, you know, as you said, it's an eternal format. It doesn't rotate, you know, so how do you control that? Well, rather than Highlander, which I've compared it to, and maybe that's not correct, this actually has a ban list rather than Highlander's point list. And as you mentioned, there's only 1 card on the ban list right now, which is Oko. Briefly, I guess, why, you know, we know that Oko's stupid powerful, but, you know, why is Oko the only card on the ban list, and what would it take to see other cards on that list? And who's in charge of this ban list also, I guess?
Great. So to one quick clarification too, which I think will help people kind of navigate why there's a ban list. I'm not going to go too in depth because I could sit here for 2 hours talking about the nuances of what a points list requires. But points lists like the one for Canadian Highlander, for 7-point Highlander, they draw strength from having other cards to give context as far as like power levels go, right? Like a card like Yawgmoth's Will is only as good as the things that let you break it. And if you have the cards to break it, well, then it's pretty good. And if you have a card pool of about 24,000 cards, then you're probably going to find some things to break it. But for currently on Arena, I believe we're looking at 22,800, I want to say, just under 3,000 cards available. And there's just not enough. The scope on the power level of cards is too contained, and you just don't have enough, absolutely, okay, there's something wrong with this busted cards to point at each other and cause a kerfuffle. Except for Oko, which is the best planeswalker of all time. And so it's also just happens to be the best card on Arena as far as like power level goes. And the disparity between the number one card, Oko, and whatever you want to place the number two card as, that's a pretty big gap. So, like, as it stands, Oko's the only thing that's banned because there's nothing that's really competing with it. And the context of the format itself doesn't doesn't open Oko up to any like new weaknesses. So like Field of the Dead is a card that kind of pops up as being something that is, this could be, trouble, right? It's a very powerful card. And in what we've seen it do over the history of the game is that it just goes bigger than anything. It provides this massive end game that you don't really have to do anything to get to. But that's in a format with multiple copies of Field of the Dead. And that's in a format where, you can reliably set it up and set up multiple copies and rebuild it and, cause all sorts of problems. But we only have one copy of Field of the Dead. The combo decks in our format go over top of it, so it's not the biggest thing that you can do. The aggro decks and even some of the mid-range decks can go beneath it, so you can kill them before they're able to set up a Field of the Dead or a board that is, protects them to then set it up. And even the control decks, they can kill people. Like there's a series of threats that have been printed at 4 to 6 as control finishers that just kill your opponent before they get to a quick Field of the Dead.
Well, that's how I felt when we were like streaming this and whatnot, was like playing Is It Control. Like it felt, because of like, I don't know whether it was like the land base or other various factors, but it was just like it felt like the game could go a little bit slower, and that these control decks could get their opportunity to like set up and stuff.
Yeah.
Like playing Is It Control, it was like, yeah, I had, like a lot of these counter spells and these answers and stuff like that. But even just having like big dummies like the Flash Jin thing, the 4 or 5, I can't remember his name.
Storm Angry Dude.
Yes, yeah, Storm Angry Dude.
Thrix.
Yeah, he was super real, just kind of like getting somebody at the end, or like the God, man, I should just really bring up my list, but it was like the Dream Eater, or even just like Kefnet, this 4 mana, like a really annoying threat, right? Like control felt very, very strong when I was playing it, and that's as like somebody that's not a typical control player.
Yeah, the aggro, its controls place is kind of funny because like the aggro decks in our format and the mid-range decks, they don't hit the way that they would normally. Like when you think of aggro in other formats, you're thinking like, oh, okay, turn 2 I take 2 damage, turn 3 I take like 5 to 7 damage, turn 4 I'm either dead or I'm really close to dead, and then turn 5 is when they really want to kill you. Like that's ideally the aggro player is going to try and kill you on turn 4, right? With that, with like an Ember Cleave or a Torbrand or whatever it may be, as far as current standard is considered. But in here, it's a bit slower. It's like on turn 2, maybe you'll get hit for 1 to 2. Turn 3, you're looking 3 to 4. Turn 4 might be 3 to 6. But then on turn 5, you get hit for 20. Like the top, like the red decks and the aggro decks hit so hard up top that they need a little bit of build up to get there. But because their pieces, the pieces that they're using to build up for that massive swing are also just usually pretty resilient, or they are recursive. They just hit like a goddamn truck. It's like if you draw them after your control opponent has cleared the board, you're fine. Like, great, I'll bring back this Phoenix of Ash. I'll recast I'll cast this Legion War Boss. So it's slower as far as the actual number moving. But if you are not prepared, you are going to die very quickly. Like, you are going to the game will be over in one snap. You'll get hit with like a big removal spell or like a flash threat on end of turn. They'll untap, they'll kill your blocker and then kill you. So yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, one that I think will take a little bit longer for people getting into the format to recognize as well.
Cool. Before we move on to talking about our decks from the Friday Night Paper Fight, just because I asked earlier, who actually is in charge of the ban list currently?
So currently we have a council. So similar to say the council that we have that moderates the points list for Canadian Highlander. We don't know who's on that council yet. We kind of agreed, on the ground floor, talking with the community, that we want the format to flourish a bit, to have people to step forward and like really show themselves by, their dedication of running community events, participating, getting other people involved, whatever it may be. I've more or less been thrown onto the council, which is fine. It's something I would have liked to have put my hat in the ring for anyways. But we don't have a solidified set of people yet. We don't feel like we need one yet. And it's felt great knowing that as a community, we, want to make sure that we celebrate the people that make our community so great, and give them time to kind of show themselves, improve themselves, and help others.
Sweet. So on the Friday Night Paper Fight, the most recent Friday at time of recording, we all rocked up with some decks that of various sources. For mine, I just went to Wheeler and was like, well, look, the format. I don't have time to do any brewing, much as I wish I could. But I remember there was a fun deck in Standard involving Psy Master Thopterist that involved a lot of sort of artifact value. What do we got going on that works with that? And you gave me a real spicy deck that don't think I want to match, but it was a lot of fun the whole time I was losing.
That's the important part.
Yeah, it was sort of like it was a mono blue artifact ramp deck. How would you describe it?
I've been calling it our Academy deck, referring to Tolarian Academy, which it is not. But you're a mono blue artifact ramp deck that you ramp into payoffs that tend to care about artifacts, but if they just also happen to be big and blue and very strong, great, cool, glad of it. You play some weird cards, like the form. I made the deck just by, I think somebody made a joke of like, so Ben, is there an eggs deck in the format? And I was like, I don't think so. And then I tried to put something together on a whim, and I was like, well, this seems kind of weird. I have 4 lockets and a bunch of the crystals from Ikoria. This seems really bad. And then I brought it to a tournament, and it's turned out to be really good. Your pieces are not exciting, and they're absolutely, not as good as other, counterparts. We don't have that many 2 mana rocks. You only have Mind Stone. Um, but like this is one of the decks that just goes bigger than more or less anything else in the format. You're not quite as big as like the Omniscience combo decks, but it's really hard to beat a board of like 25 fives attacking you for lethal, or when the deck decides to take infinite turns with Nexus of Fate, or just, you play out a Traxos ahead of schedule and then follow it up with some big dragon, usually a legendary dragon, and they die. The deck hits hard, but you have to play a lot of goofy kind of cards to get there.
Yeah, I mean it didn't feel that goofy when I was playing it. It was sort of like, I mean, maybe if you're just looking at the deck list and you're like, what is all this crap? But I tell you, when I was playing it, I was like, this all really works together very well.
Yeah, people laugh when you play like Sky Scanner on 3.
Oh, Skyscanner's great.
Oh, absolutely. And they're like, "Oh, cool card," and you're like, "Yeah, it's not bad, I guess."
Well, there was like there's like all kinds of slick tech in it. Like I think you actually got to do it once, which was uh or no, right, you were close to it, but then we realized the downside of it. But it was like playing like a sailor of memes, and like putting out like a treasure, and then like being able to, I mean, maybe you have like an extra rock or something like that, but being able to like cheapen like Zahid, the genie, by like
Mhm.
using a treasure token and
Yep.
stuff, right? It's just like it's super, super, super sweet magic. Like there was a lot of like you didn't have like the affinity esque sort of like thing that I imagine like a Highlander version of this deck would run, right? Like
Mhm.
various affinity or like cheaping effects. Like it was a ramp deck in a way at its core, was what we were saying.
Yeah.
So it was cool to see.
Yeah, my favorite draws with that deck is anything that involves Karn's Bastion. The land
Absolutely.
that
Proliferates?
because they never
like,
see
"Oh,
it
cool
coming.
card,"
When
and you're
you
like,
like
"Yeah, it's not
Karn's
bad, I guess."
Bastion your Antiquities War, to make everything a 5/5 ahead of schedule. When you just like tick up your Planeswalkers a couple of times into lethal, you can get sneaky with Stonecoil Serpent. Like it's it's the little kind of interactions that really push it over the edge. You just kind of have to spot them.
What were you running? But, I was going to say Ben, and that's unclear. What were you running, Ben Ulmer?
Well, I mean, it helps that the brand, like in regards to the event thing, that Wheeler's branding is like just straight up become Wheeler.
It's
Like
just
it's like
Wheeler.
it kind of feels like a scent, you know, like it just you're like you see like this commercial that makes no, like maybe like there's like an egg cracking on a stove top, and like a cat sort of walks across like a countertop, and then just like Wheeler like kind of like getting very cursive writing walks across. Anyways, so I was playing Is It Control, which is kind of out of character a little bit for me. Like typically I'm like the aggro-y kind of guy. But I wanted to play Is It Control because my first foray into Highlander was with Blue Moon. Um, and like I mean this we obviously don't have Blood Moon on Arena, thank God. But like
Wait, hey
there's
now,
like
what if they bring the invocations out with Amonkhet, huh?
I mean that'd be I listen I would be somebody who would be excited for Blood Moon for about like a couple of games, and then I'd go like, oh right, people can also use this against me. And
Oh.
you know, it's what was it? Oh, was it Brad Nelson? Or maybe I can't remember. Somebody tweeted out like the other day that they're like, I have no problem with current standard at all, but I can see that like I'm only gonna get so excited about playing Orion or Yorion or cycling some cards for maybe a month or two more. Like my hype level for this is not going to last until the next rotation. And like maybe that's sort of how I would feel in that sort of scenario. Is just like something bad would happen, some card would get reprinted, and I'd be like, oh, this is neat. Wait, and then like something bad would happen. But is it Control felt really good. The only games that I ended up, I think, going down on were the ones where I had to like hard mull to like 5 or something like that to get like any sort of playability. Um, and maybe that's just like indicative of the format. Was like you were right. Like I was playing 39 lands, and there were games where I like was mana starved. Like I could not find my lands.
For control decks, I now kind of hard lock myself into 40 or 41.
Yeah, like it was noticeable. But it was interesting. Like it played kind of like your traditional control deck. Like I had a lot of that early game and like late game sort of like the answers to it. There's some pretty sweet like sweepers right now in red specifically. Whether you have like Flame Sweep or like Storm's Wrath, or even if you get big, you get to go in with like Star of Extinction, which is pretty hype. Um, and then yeah, and then you just sort of like all the games were just sort of won by playing some like big dummy like Thrix or like Niv Mizzet or Nezahal. I think there was a couple where I just sort of incrementally killed somebody with like Talrand and a Mystic, making like birds and drakes. But yeah, it felt really good. I definitely really enjoyed playing it. I think like it's the deck that I've been wanting to play in standard in a way. Minus like my favorite deck will always be the thermo alchemist spells, counter burny kind of deck.
Oh yeah.
And this isn't that, but I mean I was doing counter burny type things, so it was cool. I really really enjoyed it. I would definitely continue playing this deck. What about
Sweet.
you, Cam?
I was gonna say, yeah.
Well, I was playing the Amardu Aristocrats list, which I also got courtesy of Ben Wheeler. And when it worked really well, which is surprising because a lot of the classic Aristocrats cards aren't available, right? There's no Falconwrath Aristocrat. There's no Butcher of the Horde. There's no Goblin Bombardment. Or even things like Blasting Station or Grafted War Gear. But that does mean you get to play a lot of the slightly weirder cards that don't quite make the cut in Highland, right? Things like Liliana Dreadhorde General, which is a card I've wanted to play, but that format doesn't support like this style of deck playing a 6-drop, whereas I think Gladiator does. Siege Gang Commander, which is kind of all singing, all dancing, right? It's a sack outlet, it's a damage source, and it's several bodies all at once, right? Perfect. And just the other cards that didn't quite get to make the cut, like Teysa Karlov and Elenda, who I have run in Highlander, but were just a little slow. So that's all very exciting. The problem is of course, with any like kind of mid-range or aggressive strategy, which because Aristocrats runs this risk of being a deck that draws its wrong half, right? Any intensively synergistic deck always runs the risk of drawing the wrong half of the deck. You always fall back on this. You can always fall back on the strategy of basically every card I play has a power and toughness, and they're going to rumble in. So you kind of have to like make a lot of hard decisions with your mana base, because if that is going to be the way things work out, you need to start early. So a lot of the tap lands don't work terribly well. Like if you're behind a turn, that's a lot like being off mana. Right? If you're behind a turn because all your mana is entering tapped, that's a lot like that's just another way of not being able to cast your spells.
Not to interject too much on this, but I was actually speaking with like an Aristocrats diehard a couple of days ago about the placement of Aristocrats in the format and kind of their build and whatnot. And we both kind of reached this conclusion of like, if we get like Pain lands, for example, just untap dual lands in some way, shape, or form, Aristocrats is just going to like skyrocket to tier 1 because it's
Absolutely.
the mana is the biggest thing that's holding it back right now. And like the way that you can try and mitigate it, I guess, is like, you know, you pick 2 colors and you have a supporting, or you just add a bunch more lands and maybe cut some of the, you know, the Garrison Cat kind of cards. But like, why not just have your cake and eat it too, and, you know, take an extra damage here and there to be able to curve out? Because like the curve of Aristocrats is the most, like if you could play on curve, it's the most terrifying deck in the format.
Absolutely.
Like playing anything, I don't know, like if you go Croxa into Luris into like the Luminous Brood Moth or whatever, like how do you ever beat that? Like how does there like Krenko, Legion War Boss, Judith, like it's
I mean, there's a reason why like Aristocrat strategies have been fairly dominant in like Standard and whatnot for the past little bit, right? And I mean, considering the pool that it's borrowing, like that Gladiator uses is like mostly Standard cards and stuff. Like it's, you can see where, you know, Aristocrats could pop off big, definitely.
Right. And like the sacrifice decks that have been around in Standard lately have leaned heavily on things like Cauldron Familiar and Witch's Oven as kind of their bread and butter, right? Unless I'm missing something. And that works less well here because you can't reliably get those, right? When you're putting like 2 cats in an oven per turn, that's really great. But you might not see that here. So you kind of have to do a lot more of the honest Aristocrat stuff, which I enjoy a lot.
Yeah, it's like Painlands or not too. You are going to get Aristocrats is a deck that is going to get, so it's going to make the most out of the pieces it gets from Amonkhet. Like getting Bontu is that, like you could just call it at that. It's like, well,
Yes.
Aristocrats, you get Bontu and that's it. And they're like, oh, nope, no, that's fine. I'm actually full, thank you. Or like, you know, they're like, okay, I'll throw in a Claim to Fame, and it's like, no, I was okay with Bontu, but yeah, I mean, sure, I won't say no.
God Eternal Bontu is or not God Eternal Bontu. Sorry, that's the War of the Spark one. But yes, Bontu from Amonkhet is great because she's again an all singing, all dancing card. She's a sack outlet, she's a payout, and yeah, she's a big indestructible body too.
And just to round out this sort of very narrow selection of what apparently is a massive number of decks that one could make out of it, Wheeler, what were you running on this event?
I wanted to fill the gaps in like colors, you know, try to showcase what different colors can do. And I kind of nailed it down to like, okay, it can be either like a Golgari kind of graveyard deck, an Abzan mid-rangey reanimator deck, or this weirdo legend strategy I had. And then you made the joke of like, are they all secretly the same deck? And I was like, that's a great idea, Graham. So I made them all the same deck. And I threw in lands just in case. So it was like an Abzan graveyard deck that has like a lands package because you get the Gitrog monster, aka Big Thalia. You get like Crucible and Eerie Ultimatum and stuff. And then I had reanimation cards because, like, shockingly, the 5 mana reanimating spells, be it like Yawgmoth's Final Parting or Vile Offering or whatever it is, and there's one from War of the Spark that gives it haste when you reanimate it. They are very good. And so I took all that and was like, hey, I got a bunch of legends. Why don't I play Kethis? The end. So it's a big pile. It's a little slow, but like if you haven't died by about turn 5 or 6, and assuming you don't just draw lands after that point, it's very difficult to find yourself in a position where you can't do something. Like again, the reanimation spells, you have a bunch of planeswalkers because they're legendary. You have my favorite card in the deck, Captain Sisay, from I believe one of the historic anthologies. She's a 4 mana 2/2 that has tap, search your library for a legend card. That's it. Or a legendary card. So that could be a planeswalker, legendary creature. It could be like a Oathakaya, a legendary enchantment. It's the Yawgmoth card, a legendary sorcery. She just grabs everything.
You used Oath of Kaya to great effect in a couple of the games. One to just like whoops kill someone's planeswalker, and in one of the first games to whoops just kill me.
Yeah, that I didn't expect to lightning helix someone to the dome for lethal that night. If I'm going to be honest, but I'm glad I got to do it. It kind of speaks to one of the biggest appealing factors of the format to me is that like even you're going to play with a bunch of these cards that you probably haven't played with or not in like a constructed format. And then even the ones that you have played with, you're going to have to play them differently. Like they are going to serve a different role because they don't have the context of what they were, what other cards made them relevant. So you have, weirdo cards like Mastermind's Acquisition, which had previously seen play in like combo decks with Chance for Glory and stuff. But it's just Diabolic Tutor. And that's fine. Like you just kind of accept that that's what that does. And great. That's what it does. That's what we wanted to do.
So for anyone listening who might want to get into checking out Gladiator themselves, I have a couple questions. One, from a purely technical perspective, on Arena, how do you build one of these decks? What are the settings you need to do?
So you're going to want to have it set as direct game.
As the deck format type?
As the deck format, yeah. They offer a selection called direct game, which is more or less just used if you're doing that, if you're fighting somebody. And that lets you include cards that say would be banned in historic, such as Veil of Summer or Once Upon a Time. And you can throw them in your deck so you don't gloss over them because they're pretty good.
And then you just add 100 cards and it'll say 100 out of 60.
Yeah, so when you do like a friendly challenge or a direct challenge, it's going to ask you what type of match, and they'll have 40 card, 60 card. Those are like the two most popular ones. And that just refers to like the minimum deck size, I believe. We just always choose 60. So just choose 60 card direct game match and then fight whoever you want to fight.
And if you, like me, export a game list from MTG Goldfish, all these deck lists, by the way, that we played are in the description of the VOD on this channel of the Friday Night Paper Fight, and you import your mono blue artifacts deck and it says 99 cards. The card you're looking for is Mind Stone.
Yeah.
I don't know why it doesn't. Ben knows it's something with syntax.
Well,
it doesn't.
It's like half the smartest explanation I've ever heard about anything involving like a client, and then also just part tinfoil hat that when you're importing things, sometimes it skips over cards that have in, of, and on, that kind of stuff. Sleight of hand, Morkel of Moldiah, that kind of thing. And
Right.
Mind Stone has in it.
In the name, yeah.
And on. So it might, I don't know. But
so I had to use a common wild card to make myself a Mind Stone.
Unbelievable.
But if someone wants to get involved in the community that you're talking about, where should they go?
So there's a Discord for our format. It's going to be called Gladiator Arena Singleton, GAS for short.
Nice.
It's a appropriate acronym there. On there, I mean, the Discord's been up for like a week now, and there's well over 1,000 people involved. You can find direct games like any time of day or night. If you want to fight somebody, you just say, I want to fight. And then you have your selection of one of 3 people also looking to fight. or there are a bunch of community run tournaments. They're trying to get a weekly tournament series off the ground. And if you just want to learn about the format, there's deck discussion, there's, deck advice, talking about new cards, like from the historic anthology, whatever it may be. And I mean, the format would be nothing without its community. It's kind of been incredible just to, see such a passionate group of people want to play only one of any given card on Arena.
Terrific. All right. Well, hey, thank you, Wheeler, for joining us and talking to us about Gladiator. And I'm going to play more of it because that was a lot of fun.
Heck yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
I definitely want to like poke around on the Discord and ask for some games, because that's the toughest part is you can't just like click Gladiator, on Arena, right?
It sounds daunting if you haven't, had to use that kind of system before. I think, again, like a lot of people having come from other kind of like community driven formats, needing to do that for like Magic Online or whatever, it's a bit easier. But honestly, once you get into the groove, like it's any time of night, because there's people all around the world. You just say fight. Like every time I pop in, I just type like ASD, or like I slam my hand on the keyboard and I'll get people to be like, oh, fight. It's like, you just get it like that.
Just like flail at thing.
Yeah. Oh
gesture.
Yeah. It's a universal language of, do you want to play Magic? It's just like, and it's like,
Terrific. Great. Well, thank you. And thanks also to Ben and Cameron for joining me today.
My pleasure.
I'm always down to check out new formats like this, especially as someone who's like very like finance oriented and stuff like that. I think this is super sweet.
Mm-hmm. A reminder also, before we wrap up, that the Icorian nicknames is open for submissions and for voting. You can go to lrr.cc/nicknames, and I believe that's next week's episode. So get your nicknames in there, or just pop over there and upvote your favorites, and we'll be reading the favorites out on the next episode. So until next time, a reminder that this show is brought to you by the kind folks at Card Kingdom. Do check out cardkingdom.com/LRR. And we are also brought to you by you and your kind support of our Patreon at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. So for Wheeler.
Ahoy.
And Ben.
Hi.
And Cameron. I've been Graham, and we'll talk to you next time on Tap Tap Concede. Bye, everybody.